Hello, Future Tribe. In this week's episode, we have Leonie Seysan from Article Writers Australia. How are you, Leonie?
I'm very well, thank you, Germaine.
That's good to hear. So let's get started. Article Writers Australia. I think the name gives us a good idea of what you do. You guys write articles, but I would assume that it's not more than just articles. It's also sort of copywriting services. Is that correct?
That's correct. We also do copywriting and ebooks, white
Okay.
papers,
Mhm.
video scripts as well. Yeah,
Right. So a whole bunch of writing and content,
all forms
written
of written
content.
content, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. And have you always done all forms of written content, or has it sort of evolved progressively?
Um, no, we started doing articles, and we were very quickly asked to do other more long form content. So
Mm.
yeah, we
Okay.
have basically always done that. Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you start your business?
2009.
Okay, so it's about 10 years now, coming up on 10
It was
years.
just April 2009. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. So big 10 years. How did you start? Why did you start? Did you go very intentionally into it, or was it sort of this organic thing
I did go very intentionally into it for purely selfish reasons. I was looking for a business idea. I wanted to have my own business, and I also wanted the flexibility of being able to work from home. So it was purely a very selfish motivation of finding something that I could create that could be done online, that wasn't going to require me to have an office or
So sort of
build up.
low overheads, more freedom, and I guess the benefit also of being able to do the work when you want to, so you can do it at midnight if you wanted to, versus other businesses where you might have to be there, say during business hours.
Yeah, that was very much it. And the why became less selfish once I started, and I started to bring other writers on because I realised how many people were desperate for the same type of work situation,
Mm.
especially writers who had young children and writers who wanted to pursue. They were writing a novel or they were writing screenplays, and if you have to go to work from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, that really hampers your ability to have that creative time for
On the
your own
side,
project.
yeah, work on your own projects. So when you started, was it just you by yourself? And did you have a copywriting history or a background, or was this sort of fresh?
It was just me to start with. That was really only for a few weeks before I had enough work that I needed to ask my friends for help.
Wow.
So I have always been into writing from a very, very young age. But it's just a typical case of you don't make any money out of writing, really, when your parents tell you that. There's no money in writing until
Yeah,
you
yeah.
get older and you can afford to do it. So meanwhile, go and get a real job. So as a lot of writers do, I moved from one career to the other, and the writing stayed very much as a hobby in the background.
Okay.
Really wasn't until after I had run another business that the writing bug seriously took hold. And then I had quite an interest in screenwriting. So I pursued that for a little while. And again, got stuck into the need to earn a living sort of thing. So this was a combination. This was a how can I do this? How can I do what I like to do and have my freedom at the same
At the
time?
same time. So give me an idea now. I'm not going to outright ask you for your age, but give me an idea of what sort of, age range you were in when you started the business, what sort of position you were in life, just to get an understanding of, were you sort of sitting very, very comfortable and decided, this is just something I can play around with, or just to get an idea of, where you were when you started.
Okay, I don't mind saying my age. I'm actually 55 now, so I
Uh-huh.
was just 45 when
45.
I started.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, I owned my own house, not outright, but sharing it with the bank as we do. It was more about the freedom for me. If I had to, I probably would have sold the house and rented if I
Yeah,
needed
if that's what
to
needed to
start,
happen.
because just the freedom and being in control of your own day is something that's really quite important to me.
And did you have a partner? Did you have kids, or did you have sort of other things that made you hesitant, and that made you feel like you had to have things go right, or
No,
did you have a bit more freedom?
I didn't at the time. My current husband actually moved in with me maybe about 6 months after I started the business.
Wow.
I don't have any children, so it was just totally a decision down to me.
And
Very
that sort of put you in a position of setting up a life that you'd be happy for the rest of your life, hopefully.
Yes.
Yeah, because I mean, it sounds like not that you were unhappy, but you were just sort of jumping between different roles and things like that in the lead up, not quite fitting in.
Yeah, look, I think it's a situation that 99% of the population are in. Nobody wants to be going and working for somebody else, 9 to 5, really.
Ideally, yeah, they'd be working on their own dream. As someone put it just last week, every time you work for someone else, you go to work that day to build. You build bricks for someone else's house versus building bricks for your own house. And I think sometimes people forget that businesses, when built correctly, can stand the test of time and is like a house. I think some people think that businesses are a bit more intangible, a bit more airy-fairy, not realizing that you can place a financial value around a business. You can sort of build a business that is an entity within its own self, and then have something that you can do whatever you like with in the future, like owning a house.
Absolutely. But I think there are different levels, as you mentioned before, where there are other factors that were holding back that decision. And I think it's very fortunate that there were not. When you're on your own and you don't have to consider anybody else, what they think, how they think you should do things, the risk of failure. If you're part of a couple or you've got children, then that has to weigh heavily on that. And I was just blessed that wasn't there for me.
Yeah, the cost of failure wasn't as great as it could have been, or it could be for someone else listening right now.
Yes, that's right. So, I mean, who's to say if I had 3 or 4 children, whether I would ever have started a business?
So talk to me about some of the milestones that you hit. So you started the business about 10 years ago. You hired your first person within a few weeks, but first sort of, I would assume it's a contractor. It probably doesn't make sense.
Writers, yeah.
And then since then, when did you sort of, how many writers do you have at the moment, if you don't mind sharing that sort of detail?
At the moment, we have about 28 contract writers. Some of them do quite a bit of work, and others just do work on particular topic areas when we get it. So probably maybe 6 to 10 writers who do quite a bit of work for us.
Wow. And
more just casual.
Sure. And you now work on building the business, or do you still do some of the work yourself?
No, I don't do any. Well, occasionally I might do a script, but for the most part I don't do any of the writing, and mostly I don't do any of the editing either now.
So when did that happen? When did that? Because I assume the first few. I mean, I don't know, because saying that you hired the first person within a few weeks makes me think maybe you've just hit the ground running really, really hard, because that's a pretty solid accomplishment, sort of hiring someone very early on. But give me an idea of, when did you start working more on the business rather than in the business? What was that milestone?
That probably happened in about 2011 when we took on an editor. We had some quite large jobs going through, and I was getting very, very tired. And it was also a case of knowing I can't be doing all of these hours and building the business at the same time. It's just not possible. So I was blessed to find a very good editor who's still with us now, and that was the biggest milestone for us, was taking on that editor. I don't think we've got to the next big milestone yet, because for me that's going to be stepping back even further and hopefully bringing in a manager, at least for the Sydney.
So then sort of having a business that needs even less of Leonie than it does at the moment.
Yes, or at least gets Leonie at a higher level.
Yeah, Yeah, so you can spend your days thinking about strategy and thinking about your next big move, versus probably still a little bit of the marketing and the bits and pieces like that at the moment.
Yeah.
So how did you start acquiring these clients? Because a big thing, I think you reached out to me on LinkedIn originally, and my first response was, "This is really interesting. There's this person who's built a business around copywriting." Now, not really being in the space per se, but with websites, with marketing, copywriting is a natural sort of extension of that. I found there not to be a huge demand, similar to, say, graphic designers. I think most of the time, because they're shorter term projects, they're harder to, say, hire someone for permanently, unless you're doing a massive volume. How have you found it? How did you sort of start to acquire these clients so that you're not sort of going through that feast and famine sort of process?
Well, look, that's a bit of an ongoing effort, because you're right. There's not a lot of scope. Copywriting jobs are one-off. So you don't want to be chasing 200 copywriting jobs for websites a year. But there is a little bit of a trick to that, in that you, for a business, you need to find partners who can supply multiple jobs. So I'm not going out there investing effort in finding a business owner who needs a website. I'm going out there looking for website designers who can send their clients to me, and so that instead of sending me one client every 5 years for website copy, they're going to send me a client every month or two.
Yeah. And so how did you get clients to start off with? Was it just a matter of, once you started the business, just day in, day out, emailing people, reaching out to people, finding people who'd fit that description?
I wasn't even doing that. It actually happened. It happened quite unexpectedly. I started the business by putting an ad on Gumtree. I'm not sure if I told you this little story last time we spoke. I put an ad on Gumtree. I was really just testing the water to see if there was a demand for this type of work. And I had basically about 4 jobs within a couple of days from that.
Yeah, wow.
So one of those jobs was from a website designer who said to me, "I don't have any money, but if you write 10 articles for me, I will build you a website."
Right. Yeah.
So our first website, I thought, okay, that's it. We're doing this.
Yeah.
And away I went. So once the website was up, business just came. I wasn't actively seeking out, and I probably should have been, but I wasn't.
So you got a lot of inbound sort of people coming to your website and then starting conversations.
Quite a lot of it was, we had some very interesting jobs in those early days. One of them was actually from America, and it was an insurance marketing company. And the writers that I had, even from the very early days, were all tertiary educated. I had a little bit of insurance knowledge, having worked in insurance investigations and things like that. So we took on that job, and we did quite well with that job. And at the time, I think they were ordering 100 articles a month. We had that client for quite a while, and then they decided that we were too expensive compared to the American market, where they were paying like $10 an article or something like that. They disappeared for maybe about a year, and then they came back and they said they had tried multiple services and they couldn't get the same quality. And they ended up ordering a ridiculous number of articles, around about 300 a week.
Wow.
Articles? So this is back in the days of article marketing. They were publishing those articles on article directories online, and linking to their client's website. And of course, all of that came to an abrupt end in about 2012. So that type of work involving large numbers, that sort of vanished. We still do get some quite large orders where people are wanting to build up a stock of articles, or they might be redoing a website and adding a blog to it, and they don't want the blog empty, so they're going to have 50 articles
that people can scroll through. So would you say that article marketing, or what's being called content marketing now, and content marketing takes different forms from articles or blog posts to video to podcasts, could be considered content marketing as well. Would you say that content marketing is dead now from your sort of point of view, or would you just say that it's not as good as it used to be?
I think it's better. I think it's getting better and better, because we look for information. We have access to so much information, but people have to think bigger. They have to lift the standards of their content.
And produce really good content.
There's so much content out there. People want useful things. They want to hear other people's stories. They want to know it's real. They want genuine information. They want detailed information. They want to be able to compare and drill down into the detail. So this is where your interviews, whether it's written interviews or it's podcasts, this is
become really valuable. Yeah, it's I must confess, I worded that question in a way that I wasn't leading you to an answer. I firmly believe in content marketing. I think it is, like you said, it is bigger and better than ever. Inbound marketing, people looking for answers, where we're sort of wired to Google, and Google is wired to give a good response. So when you create good content around that, just the other day, I actually saw that Google starts now pushing YouTube videos. And within the YouTube video, they actually use their technology to mark when the different sort of, say, chapters of, let's say, a product review are. And they can tell you exactly where you need to click to find out, let's say, the dimensions of a new camera. It just shows you, to what extent they're pushing things. And I love that you felt like content marketing is bigger than ever, because it is something that I tell everyone regularly. And it's fantastic to get professionally written content. But for the people who are just starting off, I genuinely feel like they can make a really good start. They can make a solid start by writing content themselves. Do you agree with that?
I do agree, and something I quite often tell people when they say they have a very tiny budget for content is that less is more. You don't need to be publishing 5 articles a month. No matter what your SEO person tells you, you don't need to be publishing 5 or 10 articles a month. What you need to be doing is one piece of really high quality, useful content, because that one piece of content will reach many more people.
If it's high quality,
people can connect with you. If you're giving them something useful, then the chances that they want to talk to you about what you said in that article or something that you've shown them, it's much higher.
Or even share it. It's again a good point. Let's say someone's looking for how to build your own website. Some people could take the approach of, link a few things like Squarespace and Wix and WordPress and say, go sort it out. Or someone else might take a full day to write a detailed article on building a website using WordPress. And I can guarantee that that person who writes that long article will get more feedback, will get more shares, because not only are you going more niche, you're also going into the details of it also. It's a very good point you raise. Now, for anyone listening who or watching the video who want to write their own articles, do you have any tips? Do you have any things to look out for? Now, to the listeners, I must note that it might sound counterproductive for Leonie to go into tips to write a good article, but I firmly believe that the people who can afford to pay you are going to come and pay you regardless of whether they hear these tips or not. So I think it's just a point that I wanted to make to people listening and watching, that it seems counterintuitive, but one of my big projects I'm still working on is how to build a website for yourself. Is a tutorial. Because at the end of the day, if you're a startup and you're just trying to get your business up off the ground, you're not going to want to spend a lot of money on a website. But guess what? Once you build your website, once that starts generating business, who are you going to come to? Probably the guy who wrote pages and pages who helped you build your website to a stage where you were happy with it.
Yes, absolutely.
So that was a long intro, but yeah.
Yeah. Look, writing an article, look, there will be some people who I just find it too much of a struggle to do it. But writing an article itself, the structure is important and it's also quite simple. An introductory paragraph, the points that you need to make or go through, and then a closing paragraph. That's very simple, but the most important thing is always to have somebody else read it for you.
So just a partner, a friend, a sibling.
Absolutely. And I would also say another tip would be take your time. Don't rush off an article in a couple of hours and publish it. Take your time, keep asking questions. Have I got enough information in here? Put the article away for a day or two, go back and have another look. Is this information really useful? Can I make this any better? How am I going to illustrate the article to make it a bit more interesting? All of those things. Put in a lot of effort into it. If you're doing one article a month, put in 10 hours effort into that one article if you need to be really, really happy with it. And then, get a couple of other people to look at it. But bear in mind that those people may have opinions that are different to your own.
Yes. So just sort of temper their opinions with that lens of they might not like that product or whatever it may be, but still get some feedback.
Yeah, exactly. Get some feedback, but decide which feedback to apply. I know this happens sometimes with clients. If a client shows an article to 10 people, they'll get 10 different lots of feedback and they won't all be the same.
Yes.
So you can't apply all of that feedback because it'll be conflicting.
So do clients come to you and ask you to apply all 10?
We do occasionally. We do. This is why we actually have a limit on the rounds of amendments that we do.
Right.
A bit like website designers do with design.
Yes.
We have a two rounds of amendment limit, and that's because sometimes in the larger companies they do put out the content to half a dozen people, and they get half a dozen responses. And if you're not careful, what happens is that they send you the first lot, and then so you make the changes, and then they receive the second lot of feedback, and you get it back, and they're wanting to change things that they changed the other way the first time. And it can just become a complete merry-go-round. So you have to sort of put your foot down and say, no, you've got 2 rounds of amendments, so make sure if you're getting feedback from half a dozen people, that somebody is collating that feedback and saying, okay, well, we're going to apply this.
This is what we will apply. Yes. I think you raised 2 very good points there. One is when it comes to content writing and article writing, it's a good idea to sometimes write something and just let it sit for a day or two. I think a lot of people, I'm guilty of this as well. We are very big on our own sort of content writing and send it out in our newsletter and write articles that we try and make sure that is helpful for people. But, we do it as well where we just try and write an article and send it out there on the same day, which seems fantastic when you're, desperate to get all the content you wanted for your newsletter out. But I guess on the flip side, if you start doing that and letting it sit, what will inevitably happen is you'll start to build a catalog of articles anyway. So you'll have the luxury of posting an article that is well thought out and well researched when you're ready to, versus trying to meet a deadline and rushing.
Absolutely. I mean, there are circumstances where you would want to write and publish quickly if the topic is time sensitive, if you're dealing with news-related information. But that's a different kettle of fish. So
yeah. I mean, the different rules apply in that instance, obviously. And the other thing I wanted to sort of draw out is that you talked about, to me, content writing again or copywriting when you're getting feedback from a client, it's a bit like design where it can be a bit of a how long's a piece of string kind of deal where, I mean, you just end up making amendments for infinity. Like that doesn't have to be a logical, end point. But I like that you've set a limit. Now, how did you? Was that just testing, just seeing, just talking to people, working with clients to work out that 2 rounds of amendments is the reasonable sort of limit, or how did you come up?
No, I probably cheated and copied that off website design.
I mean, 2 works well because it's more than 1, but it's less than 3, because 3, you're starting to, quadruple the time you've got to spend.
Yeah, look, I think 2 is reasonable, because the first round of amendments, there might be something substantial. They might say, oh, look, I wish we covered this other point in the article. Can we add that in? Or they might come back and say, oh, no, that's not really the style that we're looking for.
Yes.
So you might have some quite significant changes in that first one. The next round should just be very minor.
Right, just finishing touches for the last round.
Exactly. So, I mean, there are times where that doesn't happen, but it does all come down, as you would know, it comes down to the brief.
Well, that's the next thing I wanted to get into. Yes, so the brief. So, and when you say brief here, you mean getting an understanding of what the client is after, what this project asks of both parties.
Yes.
What are your tips around getting a good brief together, whether it's specific to you or just in general? What are some tips that you can give us?
Well, I think the big difference for us is that the clients need to have input. They need to be thinking about it. If somebody doesn't want to think about what they want, that's a bit of a problem for us, because that's going to turn into a disaster. We need the client. The client needs to be aware of their audience, what sort of audience they're wanting to address, or what type of key messages they want that audience to be receiving. That if it's a larger company, then ideally they'll have a style guide, and a lot of them do, so they know quite specifically the type of language that they want to use, the types of styles for their
like
content.
tone of voice, things like that.
Exactly, yeah. The small businesses don't have that advantage, but they can still put a little bit of thought around who they are as a business, and that's something that's quite important. They need to be aware of their own branding strategy and
how they want to sound.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's very sort of handy to think about, because I think, again, can be otherwise a long's a piece of string type of question of, no, Leonie, I don't like that tone of voice. Can we try this? Do you also try and make sure that you get down on paper all these things? Is it a very written process for, I guess, accountability, or?
It mostly is. We do like to get the brief in writing. But however, some people have difficulty articulating what they want on paper, or they just might have trouble choosing the language to explain what they want. So we have a couple of little backup scenarios for that. If someone isn't able to describe to us the style or the type of piece that they're after, we ask them to find something that they really like and send us a link. Even if it's got nothing to do with their industry, it can be completely different. If they like the style and the approach, they can send us a link to that, and that gives us immediate information, because we're able to look at that style and see what
match up to it. Yeah.
So the other situation we encounter is that there are a lot of people out there for whom English is a second language, and they're lawyers and accountants.
Very capable at what they do.
What they like on the phone, but they have to write it down. It's more of a struggle for them. So we do take briefs over the phone sometimes, and we'll do that in that situation, and then we will put our own brief in writing, and we will send it back to that client and say, is this
what you're after?
Yeah.
Yes. Now, looking at the huge volume of staff you're dealing with, and I guess in a traditional business, having 20, 30 people to work with might not be so intimidating if you all turn up to the same place of work. And, Leonie, you can look out and see all 30 people typing away and getting their work done. But when they're longer projects, I think that it's less intimidating if everyone's, say, working towards getting a website done and there's a team of 5. I think it's less intimidating and less time consuming to manage. But how do you manage, a group of or team of 20 to 30 people writing individual, chunks of text? That to me sounds like a huge volume of accountability. There's a lot of content. That is, one website can take 10 hours or 20 hours, but in 20 hours, your writers could write, a bunch of articles. And there's a different level of checking and verification. How do you get over this, or what systems do you have in place?
Okay, so we actually created our own system, and we created this back when we were doing some of the high volume work, and you had to have a high level of organisation to put through 300 articles a week.
Yeah,
you couldn't afford to miss a beat or a deadline. So our systems that we use now were kind of designed for that type of volume, which we don't have now. We had our own built. I looked at a lot of project management tools and they just weren't doing it for me. And so somebody offered to build us a system in FileMaker.
Okay.
And so we set about designing our own system, and we've got our own little system that we call Scripters. That's been built in FileMaker, and we have a FileMaker developer who looks after that for us. And essentially, we upload jobs into that, and it automates the job to the writer, lets them know there's a job on there. We've set dates in there for the editor due date and the writer due date, and when it's got to go to the client, so the editor can see everything that's going on, who's got what, who needs more work, who's got so much work they're not going to be able to cope if we give them any more. All of the different topic areas that they prefer to work on, all of that information is in the system, and it's all automated. So when the writer finishes a job and uploads it, the editor gets a notification to say this one's ready for you to check. If something's late, she can see that on the screen as well if something hasn't been uploaded. And we've even tied the writer invoicing to that now. Once the editor signs off on a job, an invoicing button appears on the screen for the writer and they're able to upload their invoice, and that goes through to our to Xero, our accounting system.
Love it. That just sounds so beautiful.
But one of those things, it's not an off-the-shelf thing. It's something we sat down, and the editor and I sat down and went through all the different processes that we needed to cover, and then had something built that would automate all of those things.
I mean, for those who are listening, I would say, especially nowadays, financially, it might not be the best way to go. I mean, it sounds like you had enough volume anyway at that stage that you could. It was an investment by that stage, a pretty sort of trusted investment in that you knew that it would return. You'd get a return on it. Whereas if you started off fresh, I would just say look at what's okay for now, at least, to get the ball rolling, because at the end of the day, a free or a inexpensive software that gets you organized is much better than a expensive piece of software that gets you organized but you can't afford.
I think, and that's a very good point, because we did use a free tool for a long time called Clocking It, which was, for a free tool, it was quite amazing. But when we went to look for something a little bit better, the price came into it, and because a lot of those tools charge per user per month.
Oh,
so for us,
the
tools that were coming in useful, I'm looking at the figures and going, wow, that's going to cost me like $600 a month to use that.
And it's not even exactly what you want.
No, and if we double the number of writers, oh my goodness.
Yes.
This is going to go on forever, and the busier we get, the more expensive this tool's going to get.
That's without even calculating the time cost there of, trying to adapt to a tool that isn't designed for exactly what you're trying to do and working around that. And the numbers would have added up very, very quickly.
So if you're looking at something that's potentially going to cost you $600, $800, $1,000 a month, then suddenly the $10,000 or $20,000 you might have to spend to get the first phase of your tool developed
makes a lot more sense.
After all.
Yeah. I mean, especially even if you do the maths and you work out that for the first 10 or 15 users you can afford to use that tool, then it's still going to be a question of, okay, what happens when you hit 16 users and this tool is not good enough anymore? How much time are you going to spend moving everyone over, retraining them all? Because systems are fantastic, but they're only as good as the people who know how to use it and the people who use it properly. Because a poorly used system is still going to lead probably even to more chaos than no system at all. So,
and you always have to be looking into the future, not at now. So.
That's really handy to know. So we've covered the really good stuff, I would say. What about some of the mistakes that you've made along the way? What are some of the, you would look back and say, I mean, I am one of those people who believe that the mistakes that I've made have led me to where I am. So I don't have to be sorry for them, but, things to say, hey, look out for that pothole or look out for this barbed wire over here. Anything that comes to mind?
Well, look, I would say it's exactly as you say it. A mistake isn't always, how do you know it's a mistake? You don't know what would have happened if you had that. And I was actually thinking about that this morning. The biggest mistake that I would say would be starting with not enough capital.
Mm-hmm.
And let's face it, there are a lot of business owners who do exactly what I did and go, I'm going to start a business. Okay, let's do it. And then they're doing it. They don't have $500,000 set aside as capital to start off with. However, then I think, well, perhaps starting without the capital wasn't a mistake, because when you start any business at all, there are you're going to make a whole lot of mistakes. You're going to make a whole lot of little mistakes, even by choosing the wrong platform and wasting so much
money.
Doing the wrong advertising and wasting so much money. So if you started out with capital, a small business owner, so they start out with a couple of $100,000. They sell their house and put that couple of $100,000 in the bank, and then they make a series of little mistakes over the next few years, and the capital is gone.
Mm-hmm.
So you can start with no capital. If you start with capital, there's more opportunity.
There's more room to
get yourself in trouble.
Yeah.
If you don't have it to start with, you can't.
Is there anything else that you sort of look back and go, I could have avoided that, or I would approach that in a different way? When you're hiring people, for example, I mean, actually, let's get into that really quickly. How do you hire? Do you hire completely remotely, in that you don't meet with them in person, or?
The contract writers, definitely. We have an application form that we've tweaked over the years, so that because what's most important to us is finding writers who are very aligned with us in terms of culture. Mm-hmm. So we like people who are accountable, who have respect for deadlines. We also like people who appreciate the freedom and flexibility of what we do. So that our application process helps that. When I needed my editor, I actually ran an ad on Seek.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we had over 100 applications, and we did an editing test as well.
So that person's full-time, permanent, or is that a contractor as well?
No, she's a contractor, but she does quite a few hours every week.
Yeah. It's just to get an idea of, how you, because again, these are decisions that I've had to sort of deal with. Do you hire someone permanent part-time? Do you hire someone as a casual or a contractor? And with the nature of your work, I guess it's easier to hire a contractor because they're projects. They're very sort of.
It is, and look, the other thing too, we have an employee, my off-site Andrew in Melbourne as an employee, and he does around 30 hours a week. One of the things is that people actually like the freedom of being a contractor. And a lot of the writers who work for us, they want to be able to continue to run their own businesses and do their own thing on the side because they're getting their own work directly from clients as well. So there is that element of freedom that people want to hang on to it. And then there are other people who like the security of a job.
Yeah.
So I see us having more employees in the future.
Okay.
You have the main thing with having employees working from home is you have to be able to trust those employees. And I think that's why a lot of companies don't let people work from home more often because they don't have that level of trust there. But I think our whole application process and the type of people that we bring in, it tends to draw the right people to us anyway.
And so talking about the accountability side of things, what does, at a very high level, now let's just say round it up, 30 people, 30 contractors who write articles for you. Now for those 30 article writers, how many editors do you have? And how does that sit? Is it yourself and then there's 2 editors who then manage 30 writers, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so my senior editor really manages the majority of the work. Then Andrew in Melbourne, Andrew is more, if we have a few large projects on, he tends to manage those.
Okay. And then so 30 people managed by one person, really?
Yeah, but as I say, a lot of those people aren't working all the time.
Yeah. And I guess they're managing articles, not so much people. It's sort of looking through articles and making sure articles are
off. But these people are managing themselves.
Yes, because they're contractors.
It's very rare for us that a writer doesn't submit something on a deadline. It almost never happens. And what happens instead is that they might come in a few days earlier and say, oh, look, we've got something going on in the family. I think I'm going to miss this deadline. Can you give that project to someone else?
Yeah.
And we do. And accountability, it's not all one way. I think what's very important, you have to allow people to be accountable. If the environment makes it hard for people to admit mistakes or to say, oh, I can't do this, then you're making it hard for people to be accountable.
Yeah, because if it's too hard, then they just probably miss the deadline rather than come in and say anything because they don't want to cop whatever is coming to them. If you make it
so we, from the very start, we don't want there to be any consequences for people. If they come to us and say, I need a week off.
Yeah.
I can't help you the next week. That's got to be fine for us. That's no problem. And if we struggle to find another writer for that project, that's our problem.
Yes. It's on you. It's not on them. They're not going to be made to feel guilty about it or pay for it in some way. Yeah. Okay.
We like to, we want people to be able to admit if they make a mistake. If they misread a brief and they go down the wrong track, we want them to be able to say, oh my goodness, I just realised I made a mistake. I need another couple of days to finish this off. Rather than people who get defensive and they didn't write the brief properly.
Yeah.
So, and I think we've achieved that because all of our team are very, very accountable.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You're in a very good position, I would say, especially to be able to do that remotely. Now, before we get into the top 12, I had just 2 more questions to quickly wrap up the main part of the interview. The next thing is, what do you plan to do moving forward? You did talk about the next step being, Leonie being even more removed from the business itself to be able to do higher level stuff. But what else? What does that look like? What do you do? Is it just building up more volume of work and getting more staff in to manage, or what's the next steps for your business?
The next step is probably a few steps at once. I have this little idea in my mind that I'd like to retire in New Zealand. And so a step at some stage is going to be expanding the business because retirement for me isn't going to be stopping work.
Yes.
As much as it is going to be stepping back.
Back a bit more.
Yeah. So I would actually like to establish a presence in New Zealand. which may involve rebranding because the business name is Article Writers Australia. And I feel that's somewhat limiting. So that's a consideration for us. It would be to do a rebrand and to expand into New Zealand, and then hopefully eventually for me to move to New Zealand and spend some time in Sydney.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. It's wonderful that you've been able to do what a lot of people dream to do, which is get freedom, be your own boss, and then be able to dictate what happens moving forward. So you're not stuck in this life where you're doing things because of the consequences that, or the rippling effects. You're doing things because you've given yourself that power to make those decisions and make those calls. It's fantastic. Where can we find out more about you? Articlewriters.com.au, that's your website?
Yes. Articlewriters.com.au.
Are you on any other platforms, LinkedIn,
and people can connect with me on LinkedIn.
Okay, fantastic. We'll put your details in the description. So if you're looking to connect with Leonie, ask her any questions, or looking to send her some more business to make her New Zealand dreams come true, it'll all be in the description below. Now let's wrap up with the top 12. So this is probably my favorite part, because it just lets us sort of draw out some really valuable things for the listeners. So let's get started with the top 3 books or podcasts that you recommend.
Okay, the top 3 books, I've got those ready. My top book is Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck. Mm-hmm. This is probably the most important book you can ever read. And it was only a few years ago that I read it for the first time, talking about the difference between growth mindset and fixed mindset. And you can just see little elements of yourself in this book, and it helps you to learn to make better decisions.
Mm-hmm. Mindset.
My second book is Mark Bouris, What It Takes. Mm-hmm. It won't take you very long to read, but it's just a very hard look at what you're doing, whether you have got what it takes, whether you're really prepared to put in the effort to grow your business or you're not. Mm-hmm. So I like that. And then my third one is actually a biography of James Packer called The Price of Fortune. Mm-hmm. And the reason I like this is because you can put as much effort and hard work into things as you like and grow things as much as you like. But at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all have different personalities, different things matter to us, and sometimes things fail and sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes we have mental health problems, we have stress problems, and it doesn't matter whether you're a small business owner or you're a James Packer. Mm-hmm.
It still affects you the same way.
We're all on the same playing field.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wonderful. Moving on, top 3 software tools that you can't live without. Now, I'm going to guess that one of them is what you've come up with for yourself, the software that you've created for yourself.
Absolutely. One of them is our scripters that we've had made using FileMaker. Mm-hmm. The second tool is Quiller, that's QWILR, which is a document tool. We use that to create our proposals.
Okay.
And it allows you to create your own templates, and you're basically creating a proposal that looks like a mini website.
Right. Fantastic.
So it's very easy to use and it's inexpensive. So for business owners who need to prepare proposals and they want those proposals to look really good, that's a great tool. And it has the added advantage that it has analytics. So you can actually see when someone has looked at your proposal.
Yes.
Or how many people have looked at it, how long they've spent looking at it, whether they went straight down to the price section.
Which probably happens a whole lot.
Oh, yes, it does. Yeah, it does happen quite a bit. Yeah. Usually they know quite a bit about you by the time they get the proposal. So,
yeah. How about the third?
And my other tool would be boast.io.
Okay. And what does that do?
So it's something we've recently started using. It's actually a testimonial tool. And it has an app for the phone, so you can send your clients an invitation and a link to give you a video testimonial. and they can
I'm
do it on
noting
the
this one
spot.
down right now. I mean,
Right?
I
Yeah,
love
right.
Twiller as well, but this is something because testimonials are so difficult to get even from the happiest of customers. And it's something that I don't want to pester people to get from them, but because they're time poor, because, you know, they've got so much work and they're so busy and they're getting so much business. But it's so important.
Testimonials are very hard to get as well because people don't want to be on video. But the Boast.io, it makes it very easy. And with the phone app, I shouldn't say this, but you can actually bail people up. You know, if you're out somewhere, you're out with a client.
Yes.
And you're having a great conversation, you've got the phone, you can say, listen, would you mind giving me a video testimonial? We can do it right now. I've got the app right here.
Fantastic. I've just logged on their website to have a look as well. And, you know, pricing's pretty fair for the value that testimonials can provide as well, which is important. Moving on, top 3 mantras you try and live by.
Okay, the first one is don't look back. So, which isn't to say you shouldn't look briefly back and examine your mistakes, but you should just always look forward and look for solutions rather than analysing the problem to death and hit yourself for it.
Yeah.
You have to move forward.
Love it. Second one?
Second one is a question that I am always asking myself is there a better way to do this?
Love it. Yeah. So trying to find just more optimal ways, or in some cases just taking out steps, I would say. Sometimes we complicate things too much as well. Yes,
we do. And I think you have to review as well. It's a bit like finding tools online. There are so many new ones that if you don't have another look at the situation in 12 months' time, you could be missing something. So is there a better way to do this now than there was last year? Is there a better tool? Is there something faster or efficient?
And the third one?
Third one would be I'm very big on putting things in perspective, and I think this is very important for business owners to do this because it is quite stressful sometimes. And I think every time you encounter a problem, you have to step back and say, where does this problem fit in the scheme of life? So there's a war going on here. There are X number of people in a refugee camp here in utter misery. Where does my problem fit
into that? Life?
And I think that being able to do that helps you, gives you a bit of strength and helps you move forward when you realise that there are definitely millions of people worse off than you.
Well, exactly. It's something I say all the time to people who complain or people who like to think that, you know, the world's got something against them, that at the end of the day, waking up in Australia and being able to have breakfast, I would say you're, you know, probably in the top 30 in the world, in the, you know, top 30 of the population. And that's you just waking up and, you know, having a meal and you're already ahead. So that really...
And if you own your own house, you've got a nice big TV set, you've got a pet.
Yeah.
You're in luxury compared to most of the world.
I would say, you're top 10. If you can buy a cup of coffee without, you know, second guessing that, that's, you know, a cup of coffee can be 2-3 times more than what some people have to spend on food for the whole day. So, love having that sort of that sort of mindset. Is that something that you drew from that book recommendation, or is it something that was helpful?
No, that's actually something I learned to do myself, to put things in perspective. Quite a few years ago, my first business was actually a pizza shop.
Okay.
And I had so many different nationalities working with me in that shop. It was the most fun ever. I'd love to have another pizza shop. It was fun and I learned so much, but having a dozen different nationalities around me and hearing their stories about how they had come to Australia, I could just never really worry about anything.
No.
Because every time I started to stress about something, there were all of these other lives around me and perspectives, and I really just learned to do that, to sit back and think, no, I didn't have to ride over the mountains into Turkey for 15 hours with a 1-year-old baby crying. I've never had to face that.
Yes.
I
So my
probably
life is exactly tiny. And the last one, top 3 people you follow and study, and why? Do you sort of keep up with anyone on the news? Or do you like to follow anyone, whether it's on LinkedIn or Instagram? Or
look, I'm not very big on following individuals because I like everyone's story. But I'm a bit of a glutton for news, especially for science news, and so physics, science, medical news. If I followed anybody, I would probably follow futurists, I think,
okay,
because I like to know where everything is heading.
it's heading.
So, but you can find out a lot of that on the news, and even though a lot of it, if you go to like Science Daily or phys.org, you'll see news about the latest research into different things. And 99% of it you won't understand when they start talking nanoparticles and this, that. But you'll find so much interesting stuff on there about what they're trying to do and what it means, what it might mean for the future.
Might mean for you, yeah. And I mean, being in business, it's another thing to always to know. I'm sure it helps you to just know what's coming up as well, because if you can see that, I don't know, the nanoparticles industry is up and coming, it might help for you to start looking at content writers who have that background and favoring maybe those people. So you're setting up your business to be able to write the kind of articles that people are going to want in the future, versus not being that sort of aware of what's coming ahead and just getting blindsided.
Absolutely. And I think even things like one topic area that I love is longevity. So people like Aubrey de Grey, I like to read their perspectives, and they're all very intelligent people, and just forcing you to sort of think, well, what happens if I do live to 130? What happens if they discover something in the next couple of years and we're all going to live to 130? What on earth is going to happen?
Yeah.
So many things are going to happen.
Yeah. Or even, is this the kind of life I want to live for another 60, 70, 80 years? And what would I...
throw so many things out that we know, good things and bad things. There'll be people who, they just haven't planned that far ahead financially to start with. Are we going to be working longer? Are we going to be artificial intelligence? Are we going to be working at all?
Yes.
Or are we going to be all out living in the bush trying to grow our own potatoes? It's just very interesting. So,
yeah. No, I have one last more fun question to ask you. Speaking of longevity, what do you reckon, life expectancy is going to be? Is it going to increase, do you think, to 100 plus in the coming years?
Oh, for people?
Yeah.
I do believe it is going to increase. I was actually saying to my husband yesterday, I'm 55. My father retired when he was 55.
55,
and
wow.
He was grey hair and bald. My mother had silver and black hair. I've got a couple of little grey hairs, and here I am running a business.
And not looking like shutting down anytime soon or slowing down.
No, I think we are going to live longer. There's going to be a lot of discoveries in the next few years that are going to help people to live longer and to be fitter.
Yes.
During those later years. So I think we all need to start looking for more things to do.
I mean, the reason I ask is a bit of a selfish reason. When this podcast goes out, this will be, would have already happened, but my birthday is next week and I'm turning 25, and I keep telling everyone, it's a quarter life sort of crisis moment. And, it's good to know if I'm not alone in thinking that 100 is going to be quite doable. And I think, 100 years old is not going to be some magic feat within my lifetime. It's going to be... Yeah,
if you look now, I've met a few people recently and out and about at networking events and things like that, and they've told me their age, and they're in their 70s. and my head is spinning because I'm thinking, oh my God, you don't look much older than me.
Yes.
And they're in their 70s, they're running a business, they're out there networking with people.
Actively sort of looking to grow their business, excuse me.
Yeah, and
Love it.
going back to my parents' day and their parents' day, by that age you were in a nursing home. You weren't going anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. You're starting to slow down. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, Leonie, thank you again for hopping on the Future Tribe podcast. Thank you for your time. I hope you had fun.